In this video, I will be reviewing the Samsung Google Nexus S. Now before we get into the review, let's go ahead and give you the specs. It has a 1 GHz Samsung Exynos 310 processor. It has 512 megabytes of RAM, and it has 16 gigabytes of storage. Unfortunately, there is no micro SD card, so there is no way to upgrade your storage, which sucks, but 16 gigs is enough for most people. Now this thing weighs 130 grams. Now let's talk about dimensions. It is 123.9 millimeters high and 63 millimeters in width and 10.8 millimeters in depth. And of course it has a gyroscope, accelerometer, and all that good stuff. And as for the battery, it is a 1500 milliamp hour battery, which is replaceable, which is a great thing about most Android phones. Now let's have a hardware tour of the device. On the right hand side you have that power button. On the left hand side, the volume up and down. On the top, nothing. On the bottom you just have that headphone jack and micro USB port and microphone. And then once the device is on, you can see the capacitive buttons down the bottom. Here we have back, menu, search, and home. And it also has a front-facing VGA camera. So this phone was released back in December 2010, and it was the predecessor to the Nexus 1, the first Nexus phone. Now this was the first phone shipped with Android 2.3, also known as Gingerbread. And because this is a Nexus device, it gets all the updates pretty quick after Google releases them. So as you can see here, I'm running Android 4.0.4 Ice Cream Sandwich. And this is just a great phone. Now let's talk about the display. The display is 480 by 800 and it has 233 pixels per inch. The display looks alright, but it's not as good as something like the iPhone Retina display, but it still looks pretty great in my opinion. Now let's talk about the camera. It has a 5 megapixel camera. The camera is actually pretty good for still photos, but it's not a HD camera, which really sucks. Not even 720p, but the photos are great. The video's alright, but it's in standard definition. Now, as I said, this has Android 4.0 Ice Cream Sandwich, and one thing I love about Android is widgets. So for example, I'll go over the widgets here. If I want an analog clock on my home screen, I simply hold it down, pull over, and drop the clock right on. I absolutely love widgets, and I use them all the time. Here you can see I have a Google Calendar widget, and I also have the Google Music widget. So I absolutely love widgets, which is a great feature in Android. Now let's talk about battery life. If you use it a lot, it will be dead by the end of the day. If you use it sparingly, you can easily get 2 to 3 days out of this phone. So battery life is pretty good. Now as I said, being a Nexus device, this gets all the software updates. So whenever there's an update, you'll get it pretty quick. And Ice Cream Sandwich is just the greatest version of Android ever. Obviously it's the latest version, and when you get a Nexus phone you always get the updates, which I love. Now one of my favorite apps on Android actually is the YouTube app. Let's go ahead and fire that up, and we'll play on my own videos so I don't get into any copyright issues. iPad 2 versus iPad 3. So we'll turn the audio off. Now as you can see on the YouTube app for Android, it plays the video up the top and you can access the comments and everything below. Related videos and comments, and you can also comment while the video is playing. You cannot do this on the iPhone version of YouTube. And then when you hold it in landscape, it will flip into just the full screen view. But I really like how you can read through comments, etc. while watching YouTube videos, which you cannot do on the YouTube app on the iPhone. This device also has NFC, but that's not really being utilized for anything at the moment. But basically that's near field communication. So this could be used to make payments by tapping the phone on a register thingy at shops, etc. But that has to be implemented first. So at the moment, it's not really of any use. So the pros of the device: a nice screen at 4 inches and 480 by 800. It's not the best screen out there now, but it is still a pretty nice screen. Camera for taking still photos is really good, and it's still pretty snappy considering it came out in December 2010. Now let's talk about the cons of the device. The camera cannot record in HD, which is a huge disappointment. Also, it doesn't have a micro SD card slot, so there's no way of expanding the 16 gigs of space, which sucks. Also, it's very plasticky. Now, I don't really mind this at all, but if you're used to something like an iPhone or a HTC, which feels a lot more sort of sturdy, then maybe that could be an annoyance for you. But personally, I think it feels just fine. There's also no HDMI output. So Dick Smith is selling this phone for $300. Now that is a fantastic, fantastic price for this phone. For $300 with everything you can get in this phone, I'll say that's an absolute buy. Obviously this phone is not as good as the Galaxy Nexus, but keep in mind that is a lot more expensive. If you're in that price point for a phone, there's no other phone to look at other than the Nexus S. So anyway guys, that just about wraps up my thoughts on the Nexus S. Go ahead and ask me a question down below if you have any questions at all on this phone. Go ahead and click subscribe right above this video. Go ahead and give me a thumbs up as I really appreciate it. And follow me on Twitter at twitter.com/itecheverything. See you guys next time.